Hello lovely book dragons, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Joana and I love to talk about books on this channel, specifically fantasy books. And today we're going to be talking about my first batch of reviews for SPFBO 8. So if you have no idea what I am talking about, SPFBO is a self-published fantasy contest run by Mark Lawrence, wherein self-published authors can enter this contest to see who is the big winner of this self-published prize for fantasy authors. I will leave Bookborn's video on what SPFBO is in the description of this video because she made a whole video explaining it and she does it really well, and you would have all the information you would need there. And I will also leave a video where she announces the round of SPFBO 8 in the description of this video because I am part of her team. I was so touched and honored when Bookborn reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be a part of the judges in her group to read some of these self-published fantasy books in order to review them on my channel, and I immediately knew that I had to say yes because I love fantasy and I love supporting self-published authors, because I just think that there's a stigma that if you have gone the non-traditional publishing route that it means that your books aren't good, and that is not true. I have read some amazing self-published books, fantasy or non-fantasy, and I think that this is just something that I want to support in my life in general. And so when she reached out to me, I was just beyond excited to be part of her team. I will leave every single person in Bookborn's team in the description of this video so you can go check out their channels. That would be, of course, Bookborn herself and Lezlie and Michael Nib and Dominish and Pete, and then of course you are on my channel. So I will leave everyone's channel link down below so you can check them out because I love their channels and I love the reviews that they put out. I have been myself quite absent from BookTube for the past couple of months. I have really been quite bad at interacting with people and watching videos and of course creating videos, but now that I'm back, I am so excited to be back and watch everyone's videos and be back as a part of the community. So thank you again so much, Bookborn, for letting me be a part of your team. Now, I have rambled enough. I am here today to wrap up my first 3 books of my reading for the competition. I have 6 books. Everyone got 6 books to read, and I was gonna do vlogs. I was debating on how I wanted to review them, and I decided that because I was just reading the books, I wanted to do a wrap-up of the first 3 books right here, and then I will be doing a wrap-up review style for the other 3 books that I have yet to finish for this contest. So the very first book that I read for this round of SPFBO was Profane Rites by PJ Wilson. And I will read you the synopsis because I am notoriously bad at giving synopsis, because for me everything is almost a spoiler, and then I say nothing at all because I don't want to spoil things for you. So the synopsis for this book is the following. Sister Honorata is a woman of unshakable faith, ready for priesthood. It is what she has always wanted, what she was brought up to be. Honorata's trial leads her on a perilous journey into the wild jungles of Pala, a place infested with foes, determined to wage war no matter the consequences. Caught between the threat of a supernatural monster and the subtle influence of scheming mystics, Honorata's resolve is tested as she is thrust into a deadly battle for survival and forced to confront an evil that threatens to destroy the very foundations of her religion. Profane Rites is the story of Sister Honorata's passage from novice to priestess. Will the rigors of her trial bolster her faith, or will the ordeal twist it into something else entirely? So that was the premise of this book. The way I'm going to structure this, I won't give any star ratings because I did not rate any of these books. I will tell you whether I finished it, whether I didn't finish it, and I will tell you what I think will work and what I think won't work for certain people. Now for this first book, I unfortunately ended up DNFing it at like 75% of the book. I was almost at the end and I had to put it down because I just wasn't attached to the characters. As you've read from the synopsis, this had everything to be the favorite book out of all of them, which is why I picked it as my first book, because someone going through a faith crisis is something that I can absolutely relate to on a personal level, but also one of my favorite characters of all time, Sousa from the Mistborn trilogy, has a similar thing in his character arc that I just absolutely loved following when I was reading the Mistborn trilogy. I love it when characters or people have a faith that is so unshakable and then all of a sudden they start questioning it and they start seeing maybe where things have gone wrong and why don't they feel the exact same way. And like, just because I've gone through something like that and I know how the impact that something like that has on your life and on your personality and on everything you do and how everything you feel, I love reading that in books and other characters. Else that I thought would be really, really cool was just like the setting of her going through this trial. I love trial, I love competition-based stories, and I was just so excited for this book. Unfortunately, and the reason I had to put it down was that I did not feel any attachment whatsoever to the characters. So the first pro that I will say for this book is that it is incredibly fast-paced. If you love a plot-centered story, and if this synopsis sounds interesting to you, I think you should pick this up because the book is really short. It is, I think, roughly 260 pages on Kindle, and it just keeps on going. It keeps on moving. We go from this place to this place to this place to this place, and it just happens. Like, you are in one chapter, you're here and you're dealing with this problem. The next chapter, you're here, you're dealing with this problem. The following chapter, you're here and you're dealing with this problem. And it is so fast paced that I just couldn't handle it. I like when my stories take their time. I like, as Elliot Brooks says, sitting with my characters and their feelings. I love that. I love seeing how they are interacting with their surroundings. I love seeing how they're interacting with everything around them, with how the story, how the world is impacting the characters, and not just how the story progresses. That was it's a pro, but it's also a con. If you love fast-paced stories and if you just want to see what happens and see the plot moving forward, then I think you will really enjoy this. However, if you need to spend time with the characters, if you need a bit more time with them and just connecting to them, then I do not think that this could work for you. At least it didn't for me, which is why I ended up DNFing it in the end. Another pro that I really enjoyed, I think the world building was great. I mean, we didn't get a ton of world building, but everywhere, the surroundings of what was going on, the politics were quite interesting. There was some factions that were at war. There was a monster that was there. People thought that the monster was being created because of some distortion of the religion and of the faith and of the usage of the magic. And it was just so interesting to see these political factions, people who are generally like at war, having to potentially come together to fight the greater evil, and are people capable of putting those things aside to fight the greater evil, or will like petty little fights come in between them and their own survival? Are humans that daft, and will they let petty rivalries get in the way of their survival? Which I really liked seeing that in this book. The other thing is that was a con for me was that, and it all boils back to the characters. To me, the characters didn't read like 3D people. They felt a little bit, they weren't fleshed out enough. They were a bit cookie cutter, and the discussions, the dialogue wasn't really, it wasn't, I don't even know the word that I'm looking for. It just wasn't realistic. It just felt very monotone. It just fell flat. The dialogue fell flat, and I just kept on thinking, no one talks like that. Like, and maybe this is because Sister Honorata is a religious figure and she was brought up in like a very strict and religious way, but like, I thought, no, like at least the guy that she's with, her bodyguard, he should be talking differently, but he was also brought up in this like kind of faith religion thing, and he was also like very much respecting her and everything. And so they both felt very flat, and it was all very like polite. It felt like I was reading a conversation between colleagues at work that were all very professional and very like, you know, you don't talk to your colleagues a certain way. And I just needed a bit more grit. I just needed these characters to have a bit more oomph to them, which is why I ended up DNFing it. So I think that if the plot of this sounds interesting, if the premise of this sounds really interesting, I think you should go for it. If you like fast-paced stories, if you don't mind not getting every detail about the characters' feelings and how the world is impacting them, if you don't really care about like dialogue and all that stuff, then I think you will be fine. Writing in this book was totally fine. I didn't have any issues with it. So I think that if you like fast-paced stories about a character going through a faith crisis, then I think you should pick this one up, because I think you will have a really good time. The next book I ended up reading for this competition was Jack of Thorns by Amelia Faulkner. Lawrence Riley might be able to see the future, but he can't see a way to fix his messed up life. He can't control anything, not his supernatural talents, not his drug addiction, and not his violent ex-boyfriend. Lawrence needs help, and he knows it. A lifelong pagan, he turns to his god, and he gets Jack. Jack can help Lawrence tame his powers and take control of his life, but it comes at a price. Lawrence will need to keep him fed with regular offerings of sex. For the old Lawrence, that would have been a pleasure. Problem is, Lawrence has met Quentin. Quentin is devastatingly handsome, way out of Lawrence's league, like British nobility levels out of his league, and unbearably chaste. If that weren't enough to keep Lawrence away, Quentin's wild telekinesis is even more uncontrollable than Lawrence's precognition. But Lawrence doesn't want anyone else, and Jack is getting hungry. Then Lawrence foresees a glimpse of Jack's true plan. It will leave a trail of death across San Diego, and Lawrence has been helping him do it. The past has taught him that the future can't be changed, but if Lawrence and Quentin can't stop Jack, there won't be any future at all. So first, before I say anything about this book, the trigger warnings of this book are, of course, you heard it, drug addiction, drug use, drug abuse, an overdose happens on page in this book. If these topics are triggering to you, please, go at your own risk, you know it. And there's also on-page sexual assault in this book. So I wanted to get the trigger warnings out of the way, because I know, like, I read them and I was like, okay, I need to say this because this is important. It's very much on the page there, graphic, you can't avoid it. So be aware of that. Now, as you saw from this synopsis, this book is it's unhinged, to be honest. I listened to the audiobook because it's on script, the whole series is, so if you enjoy it, the whole series is on script, and the audiobook was great. I think that the narrator just did the voices, like the voices were great. The audiobook was such a fun experience. I mean, I was doing puzzles, I was just cleaning and listening to it, and great. I recommend, if you go and read this book, go and get yourself the audiobook. It's on script. I mean, it's just a fun way to consume the story. Now, the story is unhinged because our main character Jack, to be able to use his powers and like control them, he needs to have sex because he prayed to get this god's help, and the god needs Lawrence to have sex. So if that doesn't sound interesting to you, then don't pick up this book, because that's literally what it's about. We see the god getting angry at Lawrence because he refuses to have random sex with anyone because he is falling for this Quentin guy, like you heard from the synopsis. So it is like a little silly and a little like, I will not be continuing on with the series, let me tell you that. I thought this book was fun. This book was like, if you wanted a fantasy romance that was a bit dark because of the topics that I mentioned and the triggers that I mentioned, then I think you would have fun with this. But it wasn't even angsty. Like, there was some angst between Quentin and Lawrence because the will they won't they, with Quentin being so chaste and being so like, oh no, this is not the proper way. So you have some angst there, but you also have the ex-boyfriend that's on page and that you just want to slap. Like, Jack and the ex-boyfriend whose name I forgot, they are like the worst characters, and I was just like, I'm done with you guys. I am so freaking done. However, there was also a very sweet parenting relationship with Lawrence's mother, who was really a nice lady, and we get to see them, which is really nice and refreshing in stories because we often don't have parents present in book. That is something I liked in this book, that we have Lawrence helping his mother because he works in the shop where she works. Because of their power, they can also grow plants better, and so they sell plants, they sell their florists basically. And I really like that. I like seeing the parent aspect. So pros and cons. The pros is it's really, really fun. It's not super serious. It's not anything like deep and dark and dramatic. It's fun. The cons is it's really silly. Like, it hinges on a lot of sex. Like, it's a very big topic. All those things are huge, and it's just a bit like, really, that's where we're going. Like, really. Something else I really liked, the characters. They were fun to follow. I actually was like more attached to them than with my previous book. I thought they were interesting. I wasn't like in love with them, and I probably will forget about them, but it was not like, they were not unlikable, they were not despicable. I mean, the two, Jack and the ex-boyfriend, were, but Quentin and Lawrence weren't, and they were good characters to follow. And like I said, the parenting aspect I liked as well. I think another con that I will mention is that maybe you go through a lot in this book as well. And again, it's the longest of the books that I had to read for the competition, and it just clocks in at roughly 400 pages, not a lot more. And so you don't have a lot of time with the characters, and the world is not like, it's set in our world, and so it's not really like, there's not a lot of world building. So if you needed world building, you don't get it here. But yeah, it is interesting, but it's also a bit like, it does fall a bit flat. I've read fantasy romance that is different than this, but that's also in a different world, so take that with a grain of salt. However, if this sounds fun, if you want something fun, and do please watch out for the trigger warnings, but if this sounds good to you, then I think you should pick it up, because it was a fun time. Knowing that I didn't end up loving this book, I ended up finding it just okay. It wasn't my favorite, didn't hate it, it was just okay. However, if you do want to read it, if it sounds interesting to you, then I do recommend the audiobook, because it was a very fun way to consume the story. And my battery is almost flashing at me, so the final story I read for this video is Phantom Frost by Alfred Burr. Travel back to the 80s in this thrilling and fresh sci-fi fantasy tale of survival, friendship, myth, and magic. Shiver remembers little before the Bodhi Institute, the secret government installation where he's been held and studied like a lab rat for the past decade. It hasn't been all bad, though, for a soda pop loving sci-fi fanboy, especially in 1983. He's got all the TV, movies, and arcade games he could ever want, but lately flashes of his forgotten past have invaded his dreams, visions of ancient chamber where the mysteries of his origin may finally be resolved. Compelled to find it, Shiver embarks on a quest, fleeing the facility in the dark of night. Escaping is easy. The Bodhi group guards didn't dream he'd ever try. The Nevada desert is dangerous for warm bloods. For a snowman, it's pretty much suicide, even for one with his seemingly magical command of frost and ice. Hunted by Bodhi agents, keeping to the shade when he can, he's determined to survive. He's got a feeling the world may depend on it. So this book, I also listened to an audiobook because the audiobook was also on script, at least for me. And I didn't end up loving this one. The concept was really cool. I thought this was going to be fun. Sci-fi fantasy, a bit like post-apocalyptic, like dystopian-ish style book. I thought this was going to be a really good one. And unfortunately, maybe it was because I was listening to the audiobook. It's narrated by the author, so I thought this is going to be perfect. But I don't know, if maybe it was because I was listening to it. I just didn't connect to the main character. And if you don't connect to this main character, the story is very much impacted, because there are side characters and you see them on page and you interact with them, but it is all in this guy's perspective. And so if you don't connect with him, you're gonna have a hard time following him. Basically, like I said, like I just read to you, he escapes from this institute and he realizes he has like ice powers and stuff like that, and he just like kind of travels along, and I just didn't feel connected to the story. I'm really sorry. This one was really a dud for me. I didn't end up even paying that much attention towards the end, because there was some stuff where I was just like, can we get along? I just want to know how it's going. I just feel like a lot of stuff just kind of fell into place for him. So yeah, this one was unfortunately a little bit of a dud. I do think that if you like post-apocalyptic stories, if you think that all like, if pop references are something you really enjoy, which I don't tend to love pop references or like pop culture references in my books, then I think you may enjoy this one. However, if it's something that bothers you, be aware there's a lot of that happening in this book, of course, because it is kind of like in the synopsis. Yeah, the characters I didn't find very compelling. So again, if you like fast-paced stories, I think that's what we're boiling down to in this video. If you like fast-paced stories, if you like following a character going, and just going from one step to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, without sitting and spending a lot of time with them, then I think this one might work for you. We spent a little bit more time in his feelings than we did with Profane Rites, but not enough for me. I didn't feel like connected to this character. I didn't feel like I knew exactly why is he reacting like this. How is everything impacting him personally. Again, maybe this could be because I was listening to it, I'm not sure, but I didn't end up loving this one. However, I do think that if you want something set in our world where there is stuff like that is magical, that is different from our world, but basically like you heard Nevada and San Diego and stuff like that, if you want something set in our world, and if you want something that's a bit more sci-fi fantasy with a lot of pop culture references set in the 80s, then I think you could have a good time with this one. And again, the audiobook is on script if you are an audiobook fan like I am, and then you could read it there. So of the first 3 books, I unfortunately had a DNF, and then one book that I just really didn't connect with, and then there was Jack of Thorns, which was, out of all of them, was it the best book? No, it was not the best book of the selection. No. I think if I had finished it, maybe Profane Rites would have been the best book, or I think like for the general public, I think Phantom Frost will be the best book, but Jack of Thorns was my favorite book of these. Knowing that I didn't really love it, I thought it was just okay. Remember that. But out of the 3, one was a DNF, one I just didn't like that much, and then the just okay one wins, of course, because it's the best one of the 3 for me. My favorite, like in terms of me, not as like I think how it would impact. So Jack of Thorns I think is my favorite out of these 3 because it was just fun and a little bit silly and a little bit goofy, and I just laughed at it a lot, and I was just like intrigued. I just kept on going. I really listened to it I think in one day, and it was just a fun story to consume. I was never burnt out on it. It was just fun, you know, it was just fun. Am I gonna submit this one as my favorite book of the 6? I don't think so, because even if the other 3 books are worse than all of these books and I don't like any of them, I would still not put Jack of Thorns as my favorite. I would put probably Phantom Frost, or I would go ahead and finish Profane Rites to see how it goes, because I don't think Jack of Frost is going to be the best book, objectively speaking, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But there you go. Those are my first 3 reviews for my books for the SPFBO 8 categories. I will be coming to you very soon with the last 3 reviews because I'm reading them, all of them at the moment, and I will tell you how it goes when it's done. Let me know in the comments down below if any of these sound interesting to you, and if you have any self-published books recommendations, especially in the sci-fi fantasy genre, because that is my favorite genre to read, but also romance. I do like self-published genre or indie romance. So if you have any recommendations, just leave them in the comments of this video. If you just want to let me know that you were here, you can leave a dragon emoji. And until next time, happy reading. Bye guys.